The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh laundry, that comforting mix that told Lena everything was in order. She moved quietly through the kitchen, wiping the counter where the afternoon sun pooled in a square of gold. To anyone else, it was an ordinary evening in an ordinary marriage. To Lena, it was home, 20 years of routine, love, and trust wrapped neatly around one man. Mark was upstairs on the phone, his deep voice carrying faintly through the floorboards. Lena smiled to herself, thinking of how hard he worked to keep his extended family connected. Always the loyal cousin, she thought. That was something she admired about him, the way he cared for his relatives, especially Clara. Clara had been in their lives for as long as Lena could remember. She came over often, bringing wine, laughter, and the kind of energy that made a house feel alive. She was beautiful, polished always with her hair pulled back neatly, her perfume lingering long after she left. Mark said she was his second cousin on his late mother's side. Clara had lost her parents young, and Mark had promised to always look out for her. Lena believed him. She wanted to. That night, Clara was joining them for dinner. Lena set the table with her usual care-folded napkins, lit candles, and the chipped ceramic vase Mark had once said he loved. She always went the extra mile when Clara came over. It felt like the right thing to do. Family deserved warmth. When Clara arrived, she breezed through the front door with a wide smile, her voice lilting and familiar. "Smells amazing, Lena. You always make this place feel like a movie." Lena laughed softly. "You're just saying that because you don't like your own cooking." Mark came downstairs, grinning at the sight of Clara. "There's my favorite cousin," he said, pulling her into a hug that lasted a second too long. Lena didn't notice it consciously, just the faint, almost invisible shift in the air. Dinner flowed easily. They shared old stories, jokes about Mark's college days, and plans for the upcoming reunion Clara was organizing. She had a habit of leaning close when Mark spoke, touching his wrist lightly when she laughed. Lena found it endearing at first, cousins with shared memories, nothing more. But when Clara called him M, Lena's fork paused midair. It was a small thing, 2 letters. A sound, but it didn't belong to her world. Mark had never been M to anyone. To Lena, he was always Mark, occasionally love, never something that intimate, that casual. She smiled politely and said nothing, but the words stayed with her, humming softly in the back of her mind like a song she couldn't turn off. After dinner, Clara offered to help clean up. The 2 women stood side by side at the sink, sleeves rolled up, warm water running. Clara hummed as she washed the dishes, the same tune Mark had been whistling in the shower the night before. Lena's smile faltered. Coincidence, she told herself. Just coincidence. When the dishes were done, Clara dried her hands and turned to her with a gentle smile. "You're lucky, you know. Mark's one of the good ones. Not many men take care of family like he does." Lena laughed softly, though her chest felt oddly tight. "Yes, I suppose I am lucky." Later that night, after Clara had gone and the house had quieted, Lena climbed into bed beside Mark. He was already half asleep, phone face down on the nightstand. The blue light flickered for a moment before fading to black. She turned toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You and Clara are close, aren't you?" He stirred. "Of course, she's family. Why?" "No reason," she said quickly. She seems to rely on you a lot." He chuckled, eyes still closed. "She's had a hard life, Lena. I'm just helping her find her footing. You know how family is." Lena nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Yes," she whispered, "I do." Mark's breathing slowed, evening into the rhythm of sleep. But Lena lay awake, staring at the faint reflection of the moon on the ceiling. Something about the way Clara had said M kept echoing inside her. She replayed the dinner, the touch on the wrist, the secretive glance, the matching bracelets she hadn't noticed until now. A quiet unease began to curl in her stomach. Still, she brushed it aside. After 20 years of marriage, you learn when to question things and when to let them pass. And yet, she couldn't help remembering that during dinner, Clara had mentioned a childhood trip to the coast, a trip Mark had once told Lena he'd taken alone. She'd laughed about how Mark had nearly drowned trying to impress her. He hadn't corrected her. When Lena closed her eyes, she saw it clearly the way Clara had smiled across the table, her fingers brushing Mark's hand for just a moment too long. Outside, a light breeze stirred the curtains. The house seemed peaceful, but under the calm, something fragile had begun to crack. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought pulsed beneath the surface. If Clara is really family, why does it feel like I'm the guest? The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, catching in the steam of Lena's coffee. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of Mark's phone on the counter. He was shaving upstairs, humming the same tune Clara had hummed the night before. Lena glanced at the phone. Just a reflex, but when the screen lit up, her breath caught for a second. A text preview glowed in soft gray letters. "Miss you already, see?" Her heart stuttered. "See, Clara." Lena's fingers twitched. She didn't open it. She couldn't. The phone went dark again, as if the moment had never happened. She tried to shake it off, tried to convince herself it was harmless. Clara always signed things with hearts, even birthday cards. Maybe it was just her way of showing affection. But something in that message, something about the word already, made her chest tighten. When Mark came downstairs, freshly shaven and cheerful, she forced a smile. "Coffee?" she asked. He kissed her cheek absent-mindedly. "You read my mind." He scrolled through his phone while she poured his cup, his thumb moving fast, his smile a little too practiced. Lena pretended not to notice. That afternoon, while folding laundry, she found a woman's silk scarf tucked into the pocket of Mark's jacket, a deep burgundy shade, faintly scented with Clara's perfume. Lena held it for a long time, her fingers trembling. She told herself it must have been left in the car, maybe after one of their family errands. But when she checked the photos from last weekend's dinner, Clara had been wearing the exact same shade. Lena laughed under her breath, a sound that didn't feel like her own. "It's nothing," she whispered. "It's just nothing." But doubt had already taken root, small and sharp. Days passed, and with them came the quiet, accumulating signs that something was off. Mark started coming home late from client meetings. He'd smell faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked who he was with, he always had the same answer. "Clara's helping me with the accounts," or "Clara needed a ride." One evening, while scrolling through social media, Lena stopped cold. There it was, Clara's latest post, a picture of a seaside hotel balcony at sunset, 2 wine glasses on the railing. A man's shadow reflected faintly in the window. The caption read, "Some moments don't need words." Lena's heart pounded. Mark had told her he'd been away for a family meeting that same weekend. She stared at the image until her eyes blurred. Then quietly, she closed the app and placed her phone face down. Her reflection in the black screen looked like a stranger's eyes, hollow, mouth tight. That night at dinner, she couldn't taste the food. Mark chatted casually about work while checking his phone between bites. When she asked who he was texting, he looked up sharply. "Why do you ask?" Lena blinked, startled by the sudden edge in his voice. "No reason. You just seem distracted." He sighed. "You've been acting paranoid lately. Is something wrong?" "No, of course not," she said softly, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Mark leaned back, studying her. "You need to stop overthinking, Lena. Clara's like a sister to me. You know that." The word sister landed like a stone. She nodded, though her throat ached. When he left the table, she stayed seated, staring at his untouched glass of water. A small bubble rose from the bottom, breaking the surface with a faint pop. It sounded like the start of something breaking, invisible, but certain. Later that week, she met her friend Margaret for coffee. Margaret was the kind of woman who noticed everything and believed little. Lena hadn't meant to tell her, but the words spilled out anyway. "I think something's wrong," she whispered. "Mark and Clara, I don't know." Margaret frowned. "What makes you say that?" Lena hesitated. "It's just a feeling. Little things, the way they look at each other, the things she says, and I found a message." Margaret leaned forward. "A message?" Lena nodded, her voice trembling. She wrote, "Miss you already," with a heart. For a long moment, neither spoke. The cafe's chatter faded into a dull hum. Finally, Margaret said, You know, Lena, feelings don't lie. People do. Lena stared into her coffee, watching the ripples. That night she couldn't sleep. She got up quietly, padding barefoot to the living room. Moonlight spilled across the carpet, silver and cold. Mark's jacket was draped over the couch. His phone sat on the table charging. She stood there for a long time, staring at it. Her hand hovered over the screen, trembling. One tap could end her peace forever or restore it. But she couldn't bring herself to look. She turned away and froze. On the hallway wall, framed beside their wedding photo, was a new picture she hadn't noticed before. Mark and Clara at a charity gala. His hand rested on the small of her back, both smiling, too naturally, too comfortably. The caption at the bottom of the photo read, "Family is everything." Lena's eyes burned. She whispered into the stillness, "Then why does mine feel like a lie?" 2 weeks later, Mark announced it casually over breakfast, like mentioning a weather change. "Clara's planning a little family getaway next weekend. She thought it'd be nice if we all went. Just a few days up north, her cabin by the lake." Lena stirred her tea slowly, the spoon clinking against the cup. "All of us?" "Of course," Mark said, smiling. "She's been under stress lately. You'll love the place, quiet, peaceful. You could use the break." Lena smiled faintly. Peaceful sounds nice. But inside, something twisted the kind of stillness that came before a storm. The drive to the lake was long and scenic, autumn trees burning gold and crimson along the winding road. Mark hummed softly to the radio, tapping the steering wheel in rhythm. Lena stared out the window, her reflection flickering over the passing woods. She'd brought her small notebook, just a habit she'd started lately, jotting details down when things didn't make sense. Dates, phrases, odd coincidences. It was quiet proof for herself, more than anyone. When they arrived, Clara was already there, waving from the porch in a cream sweater, her hair loose, sunlight glinting off the bracelet on her wrist. The exact same bracelet Mark wore, a thin silver band engraved with MC. Lena blinked. "You two have matching bracelets?" Clara laughed lightly. "Oh, these? A silly old gift from a family reunion years ago." Mark nodded too quickly. "Yeah, it's nothing. Just a keepsake." But the way their eyes met in that moment, a silent, knowing look, told a different story. The cabin was picturesque, warm wood interiors, lake view, fire crackling in the hearth. Clara moved around the space comfortably, like someone who'd been there 100 times. She knew which drawer held the corkscrew, where the spare towels were kept, which key opened the back shed. When Lena asked, "You've had this place long?" Clara hesitated, glancing at Mark. "Oh, about 10 years, she said. "Inherited it from a relative." 10 years. The number hung heavy in Lena's mind the same year Mark started his consulting trips. That evening they sat by the fire, the lake shimmering under the full moon outside. Clara poured wine, laughing at Mark's old stories. Every time she touched his arm, Lena felt a pulse of something sharp and silent inside her. Mark turned to Lena with a grin. "Remember that trip I told you about, the one to the coast years ago? Clara was there too. She saved me from drowning, actually." Lena's smile didn't falter, but something inside her snapped into clarity. That was the story he'd told her when they first married. But back then, he'd said he was alone. Her heart began to pound. She looked at Clara, who smiled back sweetly, sipping her wine, eyes glinting with a hint of something Lena couldn't yet name. The next morning, Lena woke early and stepped outside. Mist rolled off the lake, soft and silver. Mark's jacket hung over the porch railing, his phone tucked inside the pocket. She hesitated, her fingers grazing the fabric, and then she froze. The screen lit up, a new message flashing bold against the misty dawn. From Clara. "Next weekend can't come soon enough, my love." Her breath caught, her vision blurred. My love. The lie she'd tried so hard to doubt was now staring her in the face. She placed the phone back exactly as she found it. Her hands were trembling, but her expression was calm, eerily calm. She had learned that silence was her armor. Later that day, they all went hiking along the lakeside trail. Clara walked ahead, Mark close behind, his hand brushing her shoulder, as they laughed about something Lena couldn't hear. When Clara stumbled on a rock, Mark's arm went around her waist instinctively, too fast, too familiar. Their bodies pressed close for a heartbeat too long. Lena watched quietly, her face unreadable. She knew now what she was witnessing, not clumsy affection, not family warmth. It was the muscle memory of something that had lived in secret for too long. As they walked back, Clara slipped her arm through Mark's and said teasingly, "You've always been terrible at keeping secrets, Em." Lena stopped mid-step. Always. That night, Clara went to bed early. Mark joined Lena on the porch, where the crickets hummed softly in the dark. The lake reflected a trembling moon, and for a moment, everything felt suspended. "You've been quiet," he said gently. "Just tired," she replied. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "You worry too much, Lena. You always have." She looked at his hand over hers, warm, steady, practiced. "Maybe," she said, "but worrying keeps me from missing the truth." He frowned, confused, but she only smiled faintly, pulling her hand away. When they went inside, she lingered behind, watching the reflection of the cabin lights ripple across the water. In the window's faint reflection, she could see Clara moving through the hallway, stepping into Mark's room, not hers. The truth didn't scream that night. It whispered. It whispered in the floorboards, the shadows, the quiet creak of a door closing. And as Lena stood there, her face pale in the moonlight, she whispered back, "Keep your secrets. I'll find the truth." The morning after they returned from the lake, Lena woke before sunrise. The house was still, the air thick with silence. Mark's side of the bed was empty. He'd already left for work, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and the echo of a lie that now felt too large to ignore. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the floor. The memories came like broken film reels. Clara's laugh, the bracelets, the message. "Next weekend can't come soon enough, my love." Lena's fingers tightened around the bedsheet. Enough pretending, enough silence. She rose, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. The kettle hissed in the kitchen, the morning light cutting across the table where she spread out a notepad. On the first page, she wrote 3 words in neat, trembling handwriting. "Find the truth." She started small, quiet, methodical. Mark had a drawer in his study locked, but nothing a determined woman couldn't handle. He'd always joked that she had a magic touch for finding things. He was right. The lock clicked open after 3 careful minutes. Inside were folders, receipts, property papers, and a small stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band. Lena sifted through them, her pulse quickening. Her eyes stopped on a document labeled Ownership Agreement, Lakeside Cabin. Her heart lurched. 2 names were printed clearly at the bottom. Mark Evans and Clara Jameson, co-owners. Date of purchase, June 2015. 10 years ago, the same year Mark had told her he was starting a new business partnership, the same year Clara began helping him with family matters. She sank into the chair, staring at the paper until the letters blurred. The house felt different now, colder, hollow. The ticking clock above the mantelpiece seemed too loud, like it was mocking her. Then she found something else. A small, cream-colored envelope with Clara's handwriting. Inside, a card delicate, embossed with silver leaves. The message inside was short, but it shattered everything. "Happy anniversary, my love. 10 years and counting." The signature C. Lena sat back, numb. A strange calm settled over her. Not the stillness of despair, but of decision. If Mark wanted to build a life of lies, she'd learn every inch of it. That afternoon, she called her oldest friend, Margaret, the same one who'd once told her, "Feelings don't lie, people do." Margaret listened silently as Lena explained everything. "You need proof," she said finally. "Solid proof. If he's been living a double life, he's left a paper trail." Lena exhaled shakily. "He always said he hated email. Maybe that's why." "Then check the paper trail he can't delete," Margaret replied. "Bank records, property tax, registrations. Something will link them." And something did. 2 days later, Lena visited the local records office. The clerk, a kindly man with silver glasses, smiled politely. "What can I help you with today, ma'am?" She gave him the property address for the lakeside cabin and asked for ownership verification. He returned minutes later with a printed record. She scanned the page and there it was again. Evans, Mark co-owner. Jameson, Clara co-owner. Relationship listed. Partner. Not cousin, not relative. Partner. The word burned. She thanked the man quietly, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. Outside, she stood on the courthouse steps, staring at the paper in her hand. The breeze caught it for a moment, lifting it slightly like it wanted to fly away, but Lena held tight. Not this time, she whispered. That night, Mark came home late again. Lena was in the living room, calm, reading a book she wasn't really reading. He kissed her cheek absently, poured himself a drink and said, Clara's thinking of selling that cabin. Hard times, you know. Lena looked up slowly, her voice even. Oh, I thought it was something you both owned. Mark froze for half a second, a flicker so brief most would have missed it. But Lena didn't. What do you mean? He said lightly, masking it with a smile. She shrugged. You mentioned once you helped her with the purchase. I assume both your names were on it. He laughed too loudly. No, just hers. I might have given advice, that's all. Lena smiled faintly and returned to her book. Of course. Inside, she felt her resolve crystallize. The performance was almost over. When Mark left for work the next morning, she called Margaret again. I'm done wondering, Lena said. I'm going to end it, but on my terms. What are you planning? A dinner, Lena said softly, for the three of us. Just family. Margaret hesitated. Lena, are you sure you can? Yes. Her voice didn't shake. He's been lying to me for a decade. It's time he hears the truth from someone who actually knows it. As she hung up, Lena walked to the window. The world outside looked the same: neighbors, walking dogs, children playing. But for her, everything had changed. She was no longer the woman who believed her husband's words at face value. She was the woman who had seen behind the curtain. And she wasn't done yet. She pulled out a folder and began arranging her evidence, the documents, the photo, the card. Each piece laid carefully, like weapons for a quiet war. When she was done, she looked at the stack of proof and whispered, Let's see how loyal your cousin feels when the truth sits across the table. Saturday arrived dressed in sunlight and deceit. Lena spent the morning cleaning the house not out of routine, but out of ritual. Every corner gleamed, every glass shone. The table was set with the good china, the silver she hadn't touched since her 10th anniversary. She moved through the motions like a calm storm, her mind quiet, precise. Mark thought tonight was a simple family dinner, a small gathering to celebrate Clara's new business venture. He was in a good mood, humming while he polished his shoes. You've outdone yourself, he said as he passed through the kitchen. Smells amazing. Lena smiled softly, her hands steady as she poured wine into crystal glasses. Only the best for family. He kissed her cheek. That's my Lena. Her eyes followed him as he walked away, and for a brief second, she saw him the way she used to. Kind, confident. Hers. Then the image fractured, revealing the stranger underneath. By 7, the table was set. Candles flickered gently, casting gold across the polished wood. In the center sat a simple white folder tied with a silver ribbon. It looked harmless, almost decorative, but Lena knew it was the heartbeat of her plan. Inside were the property papers, the anniversary card, and the printed photo from Clara's social post with that shadowed figure on the balcony. Clara arrived first. She swept through the doorway in a wine-colored dress, hair perfect, perfume familiar. Her smile was wide, effortless. Lena, she said warmly, embracing her. You look beautiful. So do you, Lena replied, her voice smooth as glass. It's been too long. Mark arrived moments later, carrying a bottle of wine. Perfect timing, he said cheerfully. My 2 favorite women in the same room, what could be better? Lena's smile didn't waver. Let's find out. Dinner began like any other: laughter, small talk, clinking glasses. Lena played her part well, even laughed at Mark's jokes. Clara seemed comfortable, relaxed, her hand occasionally brushing Mark's across the table. If Lena noticed, she didn't react. She poured more wine, refilled glasses, and listened carefully. "So," Lena said sweetly, "Clara, how's the cabin these days? Mark mentioned you might sell it." Clara blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Oh, he told you that?" Lena nodded. "He did. I was curious, though. Wouldn't that be hard? You two have owned it together for so long." Mark coughed into his glass. "Owned? No, Lena, you're mistaken." Lena tilted her head, the faintest smile on her lips. "Am I?" She reached for the white folder at the center of the table and slid it toward them. "Maybe you should take a look." Clara's hand hesitated before untying the ribbon. The first page caught her breath. Ownership agreement, Evans, Mark Jameson, Clara. Mark's face drained of color. "What? What is this?" he stammered. Lena leaned back, her tone even. "Paperwork. Found it in your study. You really should lock that drawer better." He swallowed hard, fumbling for words. "Lena, this isn't—" She raised a hand. "Don't insult me with another lie." Clara closed the folder, her fingers trembling. "Mark, you said—" "Don't," he hissed under his breath, his voice cracking. Lena stood slowly, her calm terrifying. "You told me she was family. You brought her into my home. You let me cook for her, celebrate with her, pray with her. For 10 years I treated her like blood. Tell me, Mark." Her voice hardened. "When did she stop being your cousin and start being your secret?" The room fell silent. The clock ticked loud in the background. 1, 2, 3 before Clara finally spoke. Her voice was small, trembling. "I begged you to tell her, Mark. I told you this couldn't last." Lena turned to her sharply. "Tell her." Her laugh was soft, cold. "You make it sound noble. You lived in my life, Clara. You watched me thank you for helping my husband when all this time you were helping yourself to him." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "It wasn't supposed to go on this long." "He said—" Lena cut her off. "He says a lot of things. He's very good at that." Mark finally stood, voice breaking. "Lena, please. It wasn't what you think. It started before we—" "Oh, before us," she snapped. "Then why didn't it end when we began?" Mark's mouth opened, but no sound came. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It was the silence of truth, raw, irreversible. Lena's composure never faltered. She gathered the folder, tucked it under her arm, and looked at them both. "I spent years building a life around a story you wrote," she said quietly. "Tonight, I stopped reading it." She set her wineglass down and added softly, "Dinner's over." Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs, the hem of her dress brushing softly against the steps. Behind her, the sound of Mark's voice broke through desperate, hollow. "Lena, wait!" She didn't. Halfway up, she paused only once enough to look back at them. Mark pale and speechless, Clara shaking beside him. Then she said, in a calm, steady voice that carried through the room, "Family dinners should be honest. Consider this the last one you'll ever have with me." And with that, she disappeared down the hall, leaving behind the crackling sound of the dying candles and the ruins of two liars who finally ran out of stories. The house had never been so quiet. The laughter, the polite clinking of glasses, the warm illusion of family, all of it had drained away, leaving only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the low tick of the wall clock. Lena stood by the window in the darkened bedroom, her reflection fractured across the glass. Downstairs, she could hear muffled voices, Mark's low, frantic tone, Clara's tearful whispers. It didn't matter anymore. Whatever they said, whatever excuses they crafted, it was too late. Her life, as she'd known it, had just come apart at the seams. She closed her eyes and let the silence press against her chest. 20 years. 20 years of believing she was cherished, chosen, safe. All while another woman sat at her table, called her sister, and smiled at her husband with the same warmth she thought belonged to her alone. A knock came at the door, hesitant, almost apologetic. "Lena?" Mark's voice, rough, strained. She didn't answer. Please, can I come in?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly, "You already let her in, Mark. What's one more door?" The door opened slowly. Mark stepped inside, his face pale, eyes rimmed with red. He looked smaller now, not the confident man she'd loved, but a tired shadow of him. "Lena," he began softly, "I never wanted you to find out like this." She turned, her expression unreadable. "How was I supposed to find out? In your will? Or maybe in the next family Christmas card?" He flinched. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Then how was it supposed to be?" she asked, her voice calm, almost detached. "A life built on half-truths and pity? A wife for show and a lover in secret?" Mark took a slow step forward. "Please, listen. It started before you and I met. Clara and we were together once, years ago. But when I met you, I thought I could move on. I thought it was over." Lena's laughter was sharp, humorless. "And yet 10 years ago, you bought a cabin together. That doesn't sound like over, Mark. That sounds like a promise." He rubbed his face, his voice cracking. "It wasn't love anymore, not the same kind. It was complicated. You have to understand." "No," she cut in, her tone firm. "You have to understand. You stood in a church, took my hand, and swore there were no secrets between us. You built a life with me while building a second one behind me. You called her family so I wouldn't look too closely. You used my trust as your alibi." Mark's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to hurt you." Lena's gaze was cold. "That's the problem with people like you. You think pain only counts when it's visible. Mine was invisible for years, and you fed it every day." He dropped his head into his hands, the sound of his breathing heavy in the silence. "You were my home, Lena. You still are." She studied him, the man she'd shared a bed, a name, a life with, and felt a strange stillness inside her. "If I was your home," she said softly, "why were you always visiting somewhere else?" He had no answer. Downstairs, a door creaked open. Clara's voice floated up, fragile, breaking. "Mark, maybe I should go." "Stay where you are," Lena called out, her voice suddenly steady again. Both froze. Lena walked slowly down the stairs, her footsteps measured, her expression composed. When she reached the bottom, Clara stood by the door trembling. Lena's eyes were clear, not angry now, but unbearably calm. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to envy you. You were free, confident, always in control. But I see it now, you're not free at all. You've been living half a life, hiding in corners, and pretending to be part of someone else's story." Clara's lips quivered. "Lena, I'm sorry. I never wanted to." "You did," Lena interrupted gently. "Maybe not at first, but you stayed, and that's the same thing." Tears slid down Clara's face. "He told me you didn't love him anymore." Lena gave a faint smile. "He told me you were his cousin." Looks like we both believed the wrong parts. Mark sank into a chair, his voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" Lena looked at him, the years of exhaustion finally softening into something else, not forgiveness, not rage. Just release. "What happens now," she said, "is that I stop saving a marriage you stopped respecting." She reached for the folder of evidence still on the table, sliding it into her purse. "You've been lying for a decade, Mark, but I've been learning, and I've learned something important. Silence doesn't protect love. It only protects liars." She walked to the door, pausing beside Clara. "You wanted him so badly? He's all yours now. Just remember, he builds beautiful lies, but he doesn't know how to keep them standing." And with that, Lena stepped outside. The night air was cold, crisp, clean. She stood under the porch light, drawing in a deep breath. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift, not fully, not yet, but enough to breathe without breaking. Behind her, the house remained lit, a stage where two liars sat among the ashes of their performance. She whispered to herself, "Sometimes you have to burn the illusion to see what's real." Then she turned, walking down the quiet street as dawn began to bleed into the horizon, each step taking her farther from the woman she used to be, and closer to the one she was finally becoming. 3 weeks later, the house was quiet again, but it was no longer her home. The photographs were gone from the walls, the kitchen drawers stood half empty, and the faint echo of Mark's footsteps was just memory now. Lena stood by the window of her new apartment, sunlight spilling through white curtains. Outside, the city hummed with a low, steady rhythm, alive, unbothered, free. For the first time in years, she matched that rhythm. She had filed for divorce 2 days after the dinner. No yelling, no public scene, just a neat stack of signed documents and a simple message left on the kitchen counter. You taught me to trust lies. Now I'll let truth finish what you started. Mark hadn't called since. His lawyer had, so had Clara's. Apparently, the business ventures they'd been running together weren't as clean as they appeared. The cabin was tied to an unregistered income stream, a string of rental properties Clara had managed in both their names. Lena's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who didn't waste words, had found everything. When the financial audit came back, Mark's face on the courthouse steps was a portrait of collapse. Pale, sweating, disbelief clinging to him like a second skin. Clara didn't show up that day. Now, as Lena sipped her coffee, she felt no satisfaction in his ruin, only a deep, unwavering calm. She had frozen the accounts, sold her half of the house, and donated most of what she didn't need. Freedom, she realized, wasn't about starting over. It was about stopping the repetition of the same pain. The knock on the door startled her only briefly. It was Margaret, the friend who'd been there through every quiet unraveling. She carried 2 paper bags of groceries and a smile that had seen too much, but still managed to be kind. Well, Margaret said, setting the bags down, you look lighter. Happier. Lena laughed softly. That's what happens when you trade betrayal for breathing space. They sat at the kitchen counter, the afternoon light turning everything gold. Do you ever think about him? Margaret asked gently. Lena took a sip of her tea before answering. Every day, but not the way I used to. I don't miss him. I miss the woman I was before him, the one who believed love didn't need proof. Margaret smiled. She's still here. She just knows better now. Lena nodded. Yes, she does. Later that evening, she went for a walk. The air was crisp, touched with the scent of rain and wood smoke. She found herself passing by the courthouse quiet now, lights dimmed. Across the street stood a familiar car. Mark's. He was sitting inside, staring at the steering wheel, face pale and drawn. When he saw her, he got out slowly, his voice barely more than a whisper. Lena. She stopped a few feet away. You shouldn't be here. I had to see you, he said, his eyes hollow. Everything's falling apart. Clara left town. The business is gone. I lost everything. She studied him, the man who had once seemed invincible, now cracked open by his own deceit. No, she said quietly. You lost the things you borrowed from people who trusted you. That's not everything. That's justice. He winced, his voice trembling. Do you hate me? Lena looked at him for a long time. Then she shook her head. No, Mark. Hate would mean you still have a place in me. You don't. He looked down, tears forming. I never stopped loving you. She sighed, a gentle, almost pitying sound. Love without honesty isn't love, Mark. It's performance. And yours ended the night I stopped clapping. For a long moment, they stood there, 2 strangers, bound by the ghost of a promise. Then Lena turned and walked away, the soft click of her heels fading against the wet pavement. Mark didn't follow. He couldn't. When she reached home, she stood at her window again, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. A small smile curved her lips. Not joy, not triumph, but something quieter. Peace. She picked up her journal from the table, the same one that had begun with 3 trembling words weeks ago. She turned to a fresh page and wrote slowly, deliberately, I spent 10 years living inside his lie. But the truth, my truth, only needed one night to set me free. She closed the book, exhaled, and let the sound of the city fill the room. Then softly, she spoke not to Mark, not to Clara, but to the woman staring back at her reflection. You're free now, Lena, and you were always enough even when they made you feel small. The screen fades to black as her final words linger. Lies are loud, but truth has better timing.